valuable use.
What's up, everyone? Hello, and welcome. Welcome to Ready, Set, Cyber, a deep dive into issues and solutions in cybersecurity. I am your host, Jack Scott, the founder and cyber executive of Outpost Gray. Also, if you know, the co-host of 2 Cyber Chicks podcasts. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you all hosting this amazing show. All right. So what are we going to be doing? We're going to be talking about and stepping into 2025, where we are met with right now a continued rise in cybersecurity threats, but also with the opportunity to do better to defend against them. I am super excited because the guests that we have on the show today are top industry experts with us to discuss the top cyber threats facing companies today and what emerging technologies and best practices we should be looking at to better equip us to mitigate these risks. So audience out there, if you're watching this live, you're amazing. Welcome. We would love to take your questions, so make sure that you're dropping them in the chat. We will certainly get to those as we can. We will do our best to address those, so you won't need to ask your questions over and over again. If you are watching this in a recording setting, drop your questions in the comments, so we'll be sure to get back to you there. All right, so we have a lot of ground to cover, but first, I have to do some quick intros with our amazing, they're over here, amazing panelists. All right, first person, we have got Kalia Ostendorf with Wolfpack Security. Kalia has the infamous CISSP. Also the founder of Wolfpack Security, leading the charge in transforming how the industry approaches penetration testing by thinking about how the vulnerabilities are introduced and what it takes to fix them. Welcome, Clea. Next, we have got Dr. J. Burton Miller. He is with NSA. Thank you for making the time, because I know you guys are certainly busy there. So Dr. Joseph Burt Miller, aka Dr. J, is the Emerging Threats and Strategic Issues Division Chief with the National Security Agency and Coffee Cyber Hour podcast co-founder and co-host. Welcome, Dr. J.
Welcome. Thank you.
Next, we've got Heath Spencer with Tradeware. Heath is the CEO at Tradeware, providing unique patent phishing resistant passwordless MFA plus single sign-on solutions for the enterprise. Welcome, Heath. I think you're a repeat offender here anyway, so welcome again. And last but certainly not least, we have Ramses Gallego, DXC Technology. Ramses is the Chief Technologist Cybersecurity with DXC and ISACA Hall of Fame. That's a pretty big deal. He's Executive Vice President of the Quantum World Association, professor and internationally recognized public speaker. So welcome and thank you all so much for being here. So let's jump in. I'm going to kick it off with an initial question to kind of set the stage, and I'm going to ask it for all the panelists. But first, Heath, I would love if you would go first answering this. So for all the panelists, what do you believe is the most significant emerging cybersecurity threat organizations will be facing in 2025 and why?
So I think it's actually a combination of emerging threats that are taking advantage of legacy threats, right? So I think modern tools are enhancing the attack vectors that the weakest link, the legacy threats, are still our vulnerability. Over the last 4 or 5 years coming out of the pandemic, we saw that identity became the new perimeter. Identity is what's being attacked tremendously. I think an aspect of that is as we look at, how good versions of AI are getting with video avatars and voice and deepfakes and all of those things, we are going to start to see the threat actors be able to leverage that for some really extravagant social engineering, phishing attacks that unfortunately will then take advantage of that identity layer. So I think you have a combination of the emerging threats. And then I think, so just recently in her process of exiting CISA, at doing a great job, Jen Easterly pushed out a report on emerging threats. If you guys haven't read that, I will post a link in the comments later for that. It's really, really good. It basically just says that we aren't dealing just with, small organizational crime. It's large organizational crime and all the way up to nation states that are leveraging these tools. And I think that in 2025 and going forward, as and I'm sure Ramses will speak to this, the quantum age comes in and the compute power gets strong enough to really deliver the algorithms through machine learning to have really good AI. That those systems will then beat up the legacy vulnerabilities really well.
Yeah, quantum computing. We're going to be talking about that a bit later. I'm excited. Thank you, Heath. Dr. J, what are your thoughts on this? You believe around the most significant emerging cybersecurity threats this year?
Sure. To me, I think we're going to be on that same theme of AI. So I think it's going to be the escalation of AI-powered threats, or powered attacks, I should say. So I think it's quite concerning because without the proper guardrails, it has an impact or the potential for like widespread impact and sophistication. So like there's three things I probably want to highlight when it comes to that, when it comes to like AI enhanced attacks, and as to why it's becoming is going to become more prevalent, I believe, and damaging, I would say. So a couple of things. It would, I think, number one, it would lower the barrier to entry. So meaning the sophistication of AI tools is going to make it much more easier for pretty much someone without a specific skill set to utilize and leverage these tools. So you don't need to be, a top technical person to use these the way these tools now, or just make it that much easier to utilize and leverage. I think number two be like the evasion of security measures. I think even he's kind of touched on that. Yeah. So you using those advanced AI tools is going to make it much more easier to, kind of circumvent those conventional security measures that are in place. And I think lastly, and everyone, you can let me know if you agree or not, but I think probably a bigger one would be, enhanced social engineering. So that those AI driven tools is going to facilitate some of the development of persuasive phishing attacks like deep fakes, various like social engineering strategies. They're becoming much more harder to, identify and pick apart. I think when we first saw AI, like generative AI images, video, you can kind of tell like, that something was generated by AI. But like now, lately, as the advancements have, gone on, and it's becoming that much more difficult. I think there was a video with Will Smith where it was a video using Will Smith's face, or like an earlier video. It was very apparent this was a computer AI generated video, and then the current one, I couldn't tell if that was. It looked like it was him. Like it was very convincing. So it's just an example of that. So that is going to pose I think a significant threat as we go on, as AI continues to be sophisticated and grows. If it gets into the wrong hands, they can utilize those tools for their advantage.
Agree with that. Yeah. I think you're 100% correct that like a proliferation of attacks without the necessary skill. So like less skilled people can do more attacks with AI. Completely agree. Clea, I'm going to pass this question over to you now. Get your thoughts on this.
Well, we have to pick on AI, right? It's like you can't read anything without AI. So yes, AI is an emerging threat, but I want to bring it back to something that Heath said. It's the basics, right? So AI is going to be most effective at being leveraged in attacks when we're thinking about the basics that weren't even applied in the first place. So in my world, let's think about supply chain, right? So, or software supply chain. So you are all of a sudden, you're building your applications, you're connecting them to these other applications, which are leveraging AI. How is that data being used? How is it being protected? How is the data from your company that you're pushing to this, additional software with AI on top of it, is it being protected? Do you know that? And how is that going to be, pushed back into your organization? So I see it, the basics are still not being taken care of by many organizations because they're hard and it's that legacy stuff that no one really wants to do or talk about. And then we're coupling this with this incredible technology that we don't really fully understand how it can be leveraged or how it's being used. And the people who are collecting the data, we'll pick on OpenAI. How are they using that? Is there transparency around that? I don't see that. So, I think it's going to be a learning curve for all of us, and it's going to be hitting us at both ends. So buckle up.
Oh my God, I love it. Yes, I love that you were talking about bringing it back to the basics, supply chain, think about security as a service, defense in depth, and even the thing that we hate, phishing training, because still today the users are the weakest link to an organization. We've got to strengthen that. So, all right, Ramses, what do you think?
Oh, well, thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be with all of you. Actually, I may go with the usual suspects, meaning, ransomware in order to gain money and in order to trick people. I can go with phishing. Going back with what Dr. J was saying, and the rest of my colleagues are not tricking people, and with social engineering. But I think honestly that the biggest threat is the false sense of security. So unfortunately, that people say, well, these guys are talking resiliency, the capacity to endure, cybersecurity, identity management, access control. I'm sorry, I have a little business here, I don't know, hundreds of people, dozens of people. This is not for me. Oh boy, it is. So the false sense of security, thinking that, again, societies at large, small or big, countries or communities of the world, that they think that, well, I have nothing for them. Nothing of my universe of infrastructure or data is of value for anyone of them. Oh, I'm sorry. Everything has a value, especially if it's information, credit card information, sexual information, health information, everything. So that false sense of security of thinking that, well, I have a couple of tools. I already have, my provider said that I have a cloud thing and I'm covered by the firewall. I think I have enough. I'm sorry. So for 2025, and of course the rest of the technical and technological threats that I'm sure that our audience know about. Attacks to critical infrastructure. So Clea was saying about the supply chain. Well, you can attack a country these days, these very modern and challenging times that we are living, by attacking the electrical grid or their transportation network or their food supply, not just digital supply chain. As Clea was saying very well, the companies connected through their digital infrastructures, but I'm talking food here, I'm talking water, I'm talking energy. So 2025 and beyond, well, welcome to a new era. This is not just an epoch of changes, but the change of an epoch when the false sense of security and thinking that, no, well, I'm okay, I have enough. I'm sorry, never is enough. So, and of course, AI and automating everything, but we will talk about it later, and quantum will come later for sure. But automating it and what is happening and may happen is because it's economically possible and technically available, at 3 clicks of distance. But we'll go back to that. But that would be my answer: the full sense of security for 2025.
Yeah, I'm terrified about the critical infrastructure coming down. That's
Well, absolutely agree with that. And actually, if we go back 13 years now, might almost be 14 years now, one of the first biggest publicly announced cyber breach was Target, right, being breached. And that was exactly what both Clea and Ramsey said. It was a small business having I don't have any data that this person wants. And it was the HVAC contractor that was compromised that then was the supply chain that allowed the target breach to happen. And that was 12 years ago using IoT back then. And it's only escalated with the modern tools today. So, people are so quick, oh, I'm too small to need this. And yet you're serving someone big. If you're in business, you're serving someone bigger than you, and you are their risk.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Completely agree. False sense of security, not understanding, seeing cybersecurity as a cost center, just because nothing's happening. Why do I need it? Very good points. Right. Let's pivot a little bit. We just had a big day just recently. New president stepped in. Some new executive orders as well have rolled out, maybe a few. Dr. J, I'd like to pass this question to you. What if you could talk to the president today? Let's say that. If you could talk to President Trump today, what steps would you recommend for the new administration to take and consider within the space of cybersecurity for 2025?
Sure. Great question. So I'm leaning on the CISA Cybersecurity Strategic Plan, which they've outlined, 3 goals. One was to address immediate threats, harden the terrain, and drive security at scale. And also looking at from the NSA perspective, or the NSA cybersecurity focus, which employs 7 core missions and functions. I believe the new administration should consider, a few things, a couple of things that come to mind right now. I think number one, we kind of just touched on it a bit, strengthening critical infrastructure. We want to make sure we strengthen it against, escalating, persistent threats, particularly for like the energy sector, water sector, and transportation. I think number 2, you want to look at space systems cybersecurity. We want to make sure we're developing robust cybersecurity requirements for space systems, including, we want to have secure command and control protocols for hardware and software protections. Also, we'll make sure we have an accurate inventory and improve our defenses for space ground systems to ensure, resilience against cyber attacks targeting global communications and critical infrastructure. And lastly, again, number 3, kind of still touching a bit on AI, but I think it's important. We want to make sure that we're leveraging AI for cyber defense. So supporting NSA and NIST initiatives to explore, AI applications in cybersecurity, including detecting threats and addressing those AI specific vulnerabilities that are out there. And also you want to establish guidelines for secure AI system development, and usage across federal agencies. Like, just how does that look like within the federal government? What's, like, as I mentioned when we started out, what are those guardrails? So we just want to make sure those are in place, so that way we're using it effectively to support our missions, but also that the data that's being utilized or leveraged in there, that is going to be safe.
Yeah, and one of the areas that's really heavily focused on is that, and Clea touched on this too, is that supply chain. As we're rolling out, as we're getting AI in the environment, what is that supply chain? And I think the government is doing a really good job at trying to address this. I think we're a little bit behind. Like, we have the CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, that really does focus on that as well, and some other things. So 100% agree on that. I'm going to open the floor really quick before we pivot into the next question, just see if any of the panelists that haven't answered this would like to touch on this really quick before we move on.
If I may say something very rapidly, if I may, Jax, and of course my esteemed colleagues, very rapidly. So on AI, of course, is the buzzword, the topic of the decade, I would say, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, going back to basics, Heath was saying. So at the end of the day, it's AI, but remember when cloud came, and now cloud is so into the fabrics of what we do. But we were asking those questions in cloud, 5, 7, 10 years ago. I mean, who has access to what, where, how the access was granted, where it's going to be located with AI. And I understand it's the topic of the decade, but who has access to what, the ethics of all that, the guardrail that Dr. J was mentioning. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel, because we have the ISO 38507 that is government of an AI system. It's written there. You have the ISO, and ISO are standards that are backed by 155 countries. So I'm talking about standards, and I'm from Europe, I'm from Barcelona, Spain, and we in Europe, that we have probably too much regulation, but you don't have to reinvent anything. When it's about asking the right questions to the right people at the right time, or having the right answers from the right people at the right time, who has access to what, where the information is located, how are we going to classify data, what are the ethics of the systems and governance and management systems of AI in this case. I mean, the book has been written. The book is written already in terms of defense. So I would say, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't think that this is, chaotic. Quite on the contrary, read the book and just start building it robust and solid in terms of governance. That would be my contribution in terms of AI.
The only other thing I would add real quick on, just thoughts on the new administration and those things, and it actually came in from a public comment also, is that as they are, as this administration is looking to drive, and we'll use the term efficiency around cost spending, just like was mentioned previously with kind of head in the sand mentality of like false sense of security, we need to actually really still keep cyber as something that is critical infrastructure today across all businesses.
Right.
And the bottom line is, if there is a business connected to the internet, you are on the playing field, and it is something that needs to be taken seriously from the federal level through the state level to the local communities. And so the comment was, don't defund CISA, right? There still needs to be something taken seriously there for keeping that organization going and enabling even smaller organizations like the Center for Internet Security, which really help drive baseline actionable controls for small businesses to go implement. I mean, if you're a business and you're not even looking at the CIS controls, and I'll give a quick shout out to Matt Lee, who's done a lot of work to try to map how solutions can fit the different controls and all of those things. That just start, it's been mentioned multiple times, start with the basics, but for the administration level, you need to keep cyber a top priority.
Mm-hmm. I like the question that just came in for Kale, actually. Good to see you, man. Thanks for joining. What role does AI play in shaping political and social conflicts in 2025? This is a good one. I think, Dr. J, you kind of touched on this a little bit. Do you want to answer this question?
Yeah, I think succinctly, it comes down to misinformation or disinformation. AI could definitely ramp things up when putting out messaging that's going to favor, I guess, the perpetrator or the person who's putting it out there, or nation state or whoever that may be. So, yeah, AI helps fast forward that advancement, and like as I mentioned before earlier, it makes it that much harder to decipher like what's real and what's not. And honestly, or maybe sadly, a lot of folks, they don't take that time to really, dig deep and try to see like, hey, is this real or not? But like, as soon as they see a big headline or say, oh yeah, so-and-so said this, they just run with it. They don't really take the time to verify, kind of break it down. And that could be a problem. So yeah.
Well, and I think that ties into so it goes back to just the data, right? Is the data coming from a reliable source, or was this filled in? And it really comes back to, as Ramsey's mentioned, there's existing frameworks, right? We don't have to reinvent the frameworks. The frameworks are there, but how are you going to drive identity insurance of the data? How are you going to say that this is a trusted resource? And, this is a totally different conversation and rabbit trail of like, how are these social platforms using community notes going to actually drive assurance of where it was originated from, of the data, right?
I mean, we can learn from lessons from social media, right? Like, we poured all of our heart and soul. We'll pick on Facebook. We poured all of our heart and soul into Facebook, and that data was used to manipulate us and completely change the perception of what is going on in our world. And we were fed what the algorithm thought we wanted to see. So how do we know AI is not going to do the same thing? Especially, it's going to, right? Especially with some of the guardrails that we know should be put in place, like validating facts and validating the information and the sources. When they're being removed, we're seeing it being removed on a daily basis. So I'm not very positive and optimistic about it that people are going to do the right thing. People want, and AI is a product of the people behind it, they want to please the person who's receiving the information. So they are going to put out these tools are going to put out things that they think you want to see so that you come back. So
nobody reads the terms and conditions anymore, or
No,
probably
sir.
ever.
Or they never
Forever.
did. Never did.
Yeah. I think
And
we're going to
actually,
stay on. Yeah, go
Just
ahead.
give me 10 seconds just to say, actually, Kill's question and Andy's comments that is coming through, when they said shaping in their question, in my mind was how they, accelerate, amplify. In my mind, it was not how AI can reduce, the threat landscape. When they meant, and Kill's question was how it will shape the shaping, meaning, unfortunately, they multiply it. AI accelerates, that surface of attack. AI multiplies, expands. I mean, all of the verbs are positive in nature, but meaning the consequences are negative. They make it faster, more unreliable. They amplify, multiply, accelerate. So and that's bad. That's bad. I'm not positive, as Clea was saying. I'm not positive either, because I mean it is a changing world. That it's everything is being accelerated by AI that gives at the speed of light. But back to you.
It is the speed of light. I want to take a pause and just thank everybody that's in the chat. I see Andy, Prayson, Farley, and then Luke. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Keep engaging. We love it. So kind of on the same topic, but just a slight pivot, because we're going to still kind of talk about some big changes in the administration that's happening. Of course, we're going to be talking about AI a little bit more, but it's going to be really focused around Stargate and your thoughts on that. Like, Stargate was just announced. It's an engagement that will have right now, and probably more, that it's been announced, $500 billion in investment in AI, which could be a literal game changer for the health sector, for example, because that was some of the examples they were giving during that press release. This tech partnership is also with some big names like OpenAI, and then you've got the SoftBank for financing and Oracle as well. I'm going to pass this over to Clea. I would love to know your thoughts on how do you see this partnership with this AI innovation as a positive, and we've been talking about some of the negative too, but play on kind of what is the positive of this, but what is also that negative of this constantly growing threatscape that we have?
All right. There's lots of positives. Obviously, we're all in security, so we're constantly, dooms playing and worst case scenario. So, I mean, positives, think of all of this data that's going to be able to be crunched and analyzed and compared against each other. Innovation is going to happen. It's, we're seeing it in how we're reviewing the stars in our solar system and additional planets, which is going to create, new research, which could help us in fighting disease or energy, all the things that, as a society that we rely on and we need. Amazing innovation. Okay, we're going back to doomsdaying. My concern is these are billionaires who are controlling this, right? So where is the benefit to creating, a cancer shot, right? That was one of the examples. That's going to, yes, it's going to heal a lot of people, which, as somebody who has witnessed death from cancer firsthand, I'm 100% for it. But is that in their best interest, right? Are we going to, what are the controls in place? So if we're pouring all this money into this technology and we're building this innovation, how can we do it for the greater good and not just to increase profits? And this is coming from somebody who owns a company, right? I understand you need to make money, but I also want to take this technology and use it for the greater good and not just put it in the hands to make more people more money. Let's think about society as a whole.
Yeah, but it is all about the money too in this space. It's like we're seeing all these tech firms just blow up, makes lots and lots of money, and it's easy cash right now in that space. Quantum's going to be next, which we'll talk on that. All right, this question just came in. I love it, Praise, and thank you. What about dependencies on single vendors like CrowdStrike? We all remember what happened with CrowdStrike, and I think that's what this question is about. How can people, orgs, or governments deal with such a thing, such a dependency in their environment that when an update happens, they're literally crippled? Who would like to take that? Heath, you want, or Ramsey? You were looking, huh?
Well, I wish, actually, I wrote an article that very same day that happened. If I recall correctly, it was July, this past year. I wrote an article that very same day because I was affected. I was traveling and I was flying. Of course, my plane got delayed. You know the drill, right? Basically, I mean, dependency is bad the moment that if that specific vendor, you know, breaks. So and it's difficult when I'm talking about operating systems, or not just that vendor that is being mentioned on the question, but digital hygiene will solve the day. Of course, if they break and if that your cloud service provider or your technology provider, you know, is faulty, I mean, you can do nothing because it's their fault. But however, you can prepare, and this is called, you know, backups, and this is called proper digital hygiene, trying to diversify as much as possible, especially if everybody and our audience is thinking about operating systems. You know, Ramses, 95% of the world is running in one specific operating system. I get it. But if you plan accordingly, just in case, the just in case game, what happens if it breaks? What happens if I have a fire? I mean, when we teach cybersecurity and when we teach, you know, our topics, there's something called cold rooms, war rooms, and hot rooms. I mean, and they're expensive. I get it. I mean, it's about money, it's about budget, but it's about preparing. It's about readiness, and a good CISO, she or he, a good CIO, he or she, legal counsel, HR people, purchasing managers. I know you make things with money. You make things investing. I get it. But if you want to solve that problem, among many things, first crossing your fingers in order for your providers to not to fail. But if they do, you shouldn't. Meaning, I mean, you have backups, you have just in case a dozen of computers in case you have a ransomware attack. Your critical infrastructure, it has to be doubled and maybe tripled. And again, everybody probably is putting a face saying, "Hey, Ramses, but I need money to do that." I get it, but you solve the day by not depending on one, two sole providers just in case. That would be my answer. I know that people might disagree with that, but dependency is not good. You cannot do that with operating systems, with one specific leader in endpoint protection or cloud provider. But you can do your part of the equation by preparing, backing up, you know, and having a just in case plan. That would be my answer, Jack.
Well, I think it goes back to what Kalia said too. Make sure you have the basics in place before we all start sprinkling AI in our environments. Yeah. Keith. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and Andy put this up. It's you know, incident response, right? It doesn't have to be a cyber incident. It doesn't have to be ransomware. It could just be an outage of some sort, and that's an incident. And how are you prepared for that? And then addressing it. So I think companies have to vote with their dollar, right? They need to choose the technologies they think are going to do it the best. However, and as Clea mentioned, I'm a business owner. It needs to make money. I run a software company that's delivering a service, right? There is nothing that is 100% bulletproof. Not a single thing out there. And there's humans involved. It means mistakes are going to happen. So can you use things that are standards based so that if something happens, you can quickly move to a different situation because it's standards based, right? So you can move something over to something else. Now with the CrowdStrike thing, you know, I wouldn't say that you don't necessarily have vendor lock with them, but you chose them. You voted with your dollar to do their job, and they do it the best they absolutely can. But a mistake was made, and it affected a lot of people. Just after that, which wasn't as big of an incident, but really hit home for a lot of let's say SMB sized businesses, is there was a supply chain outage in the automotive space that was billions of dollars of outages with the CDK incident, affecting dealerships from being able to run their daily sales organization. And they just didn't know how to go back to, how do I sell a car using paper receipts, right? And that could have been addressed with the right, you know, forethought of like, hey, if this goes down, what's my redundancy plan? And if you are using tools that are built with standards-based frameworks, that you should be able to roll over to some other framework or some other vendor inside of that same framework.
Backup for the backups. Agreed. Very good points. All right, let's talk about quantum computing. I love this topic. I mean, this has been, if you guys have been tracking, anybody watching this, the stocks, they've been going up, they've been going down. It's been getting wild. Then the NVIDIA CEO came out and gave his little thoughts around it, and then it tanked it. So it's all over the place. It's a hot topic, I think, right next to AI. So quantum computing is emerging. It is a disruptor in the cybersecurity space. And Ramsey, your thought on how close are we to see quantum-based attacks? Are they in the way in the future? And if so, should organizations be doing anything to prepare? What would that look like?
All right, thank you for the question. I will try to squeeze it because, of course, you first need to explain, quantum physics and quantum and dynamics in the world of encryption, how we can break encryption. Any encryption, let me say it again, any encryption known by humans today. So do we have quantum computers today? Yes. Do we have quantum computers that they can break, RSA encryption, Diffie-Hellman, elliptic curve, those secrets? Well, not yet. The thing is that it's about, in my opinion, and the mathematicians and physics physics professionals that I work with, they say it's 7, 9, 12 years away. So 7, 9, 12, it's a number, it's the next decade, but it's not in 50 years from now. It's not a futuristic thing like, in 30 years from today. No, quite on the contrary. 7 years is the day after tomorrow in a way. But the question also is critical in terms of when they exist, in terms of having the possibility of quantum-based attacks. Any information today that is not quantum resistant, which is basically all of the information that we have around the planet today, it can be broken. And that's a critical thing. There's information that in 7 years' time is not important, is not critical, right? But there's quite a good deal of information like defense strategies or the Coca-Cola formula or the formula of a new aspirin or whatever it will be critical. So that there's intellectual property that it will be massively relevant in 7, 9, 12 years from today, and it is not being encrypted with a cryptography that is quantum resistant. So it is not going to be tomorrow. When I teach on quantum computing and in my role as executive vice president of the Quantum World Association, I say there are a million other things that we have to do in cybersecurity: classification, DLP, identity management, access control, endpoint protection. You know the drill, right? But one of those is start getting interested on, quantum cryptography and creating secret and keeping it as a secret. So that would be my answer, Jax. I can go longer, but I would like to hear my colleagues. But the question is, when they really arrive, they are babies today. The quantum computers exist, but they are babies. When they become, at a younger age, when they become teenagers or adults, then we have a problem. And this is not 30 years from today or 50. It's going to be not 5, but 7, 9, 12 years away from today, and I think that any information is interesting in terms of the capability of being broken. Back to you guys.
I want to do a follow-up though, because you are kind of the expert in this space. You're teaching on it. You're getting people abreast of it. So NIST came out with some quantum encryption options, 4 of them, if I remember correctly. Have you had a chance to review those? And what are your thoughts on organizations trying to get ahead by implementing those in certain parts of their environment?
That's correct. Very good. Very, very short answer. Yes, there are 3 or 4 already published. They're good, and they're coming from the NIST. I celebrate that. The question is if they are going to be standardized. So there's a paper, and they're solid. So how people are going to embrace it? And with all due respect for the country that I'm going to mention, is it China going to embrace it? Or they will say, no, that's not for me, because I'm so advanced on quantum that I am not interested on having a quantum resistant cryptography. If it's not becoming a standard, how do, for instance, governments of the world or banks of the world standardizing, that quantum resistant cryptography? If 1, 2, 3 large countries of the world say, no, you know what? We agree that we disagree. It is not in my interest to have the weapon, to have the solution for that, because I am super, super advanced. And I'm talking about, with all due respect again, but China specifically. So I celebrate the NIST, and they are good. And by the way, the 3 or 4 proposals they have different approaches. So not only one single direction. So I do celebrate that. But question is, are they going to be mainstream anytime soon? Especially, are they going to be mainstream in 7, 9, or 12 years from now? I don't know. I highly doubt it. So that's my question. If they're going to be embraced and become a standard. So that would be my answer. Yeah.
Love it. All right, we're going to move on. Love the quantum talk. We've got a lot to cover. So we're going to pivot into pen testing. Clea, I'm going to pivot this question over to you as far as pen testing. As a pen testing expert yourself, what vulnerabilities do you see that attackers are exploiting the most frequently, especially in the space of working with your clients? And what can you communicate to those organizations to help them better prepare and tackle some of these vulnerabilities?
Well, it's not going to be a surprise what I'm going to say, but it's the basics, right? I'm never finding 0 days. Sometimes, and that's always exciting. But it's never a 0 day that you know we can exploit. It's always the basics. It's your cross-site scripting, it's authentication, it's passwords. You know, it's all the basics that should have been caught before a product was made into production, but they exist and they're very exploitable.
Yeah. All right, pass it over to Dr. J. Do you want to add anything to this as far as any pen testing or vulnerabilities that you've seen in the environment from your lens?
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I know we have folks that definitely deal with this more on a day-to-day basis, but like for me, from my perspective, I guess just giving more of a general view or general I guess answer with this. It can, I think as we talked about it, it's going to level up, you know, those capabilities for everyone. So as you mentioned, doing with pen testing, it's going and other different aspects as pertains to cybersecurity is going to make it that much. I think it's going to make it. It's going to for one, I think it's going to help even the playing field a bit, leveraging those AI tools. But then it also is going to make I would say it's going to make that feel much more dangerous, because now you're not dealing with those, not just experts who are carrying this out, or, you know, someone who is skilled in pen testing. It could be someone who doesn't have those skills, but they just know how to use that tool. Give them a few hours with it and they'll be right there with you. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing that I could see, or something that could be leveraged.
All right, Rob's question here. I think this is a good one maybe for Heath. What do you see as the most game-changing solution? That's a broad question, by the way, to help mitigate risk. Woo, most game-changing though. That's a tough one.
Well, I mean, I guess you could take a couple different ways to look at this, and I think I got teed up on this one, so I'll be very candid and truthful and say this one was made for me. So, and Clea can answer this, right? She just did with the basics, right? So she said a couple other things. Phishing, passwords are still the #1 threat vector. I think if you go to Verizon's DBIR report, credential manipulation in some fashion is still 80% of all successful attack vectors, how they get there. So if you're going to talk about the most game-changing, you should talk about something that's going to address the #1 threat vector still today, which is identity manipulation. So, you know, as much as the world is talking about passkeys from the FIDO Alliance and how those things are becoming phishing resistant, I think that they forget in, you know, just touting a passkey, that the frameworks, whether this is from someone like Andy Runyon at Fifth Wall Solutions Cyber Insurance, or from federal regulation like the FTC safeguards rule, but the requirement is multi-factor authentication. And how are you implementing MFA in a way that you can actually drive adoption of the MFA across all users, across all critical applications, wherever sensitive data is, or whatever else, your business communication tools, which business email compromise is the #1 place that identity is misused, right? To then get access to other things. Then you've got tools like Slack that also get misused because people are sharing their secrets. You know, Ramsey's mentioned this the other day, your secret's supposed to be a secret. But if you're using technologies, legacy-based authentication, that are using shareable secrets, they're going to get shared. Right. So to me, the most game-changing thing you can do is move to non-shareable secret-based authentication, meaning it needs to be MFA that is transparent or invisible to the user, so the factors aren't shareable or knowable at any point of the game, and authenticate a user using biometrics, trait-based, authentication. I mentioned passkeys earlier. One of the biggest problems with passkeys is you can store them on multiple devices and they're shareable, which means they're not device bound, which removes the MFA part of it. So if you are considering going that direction, especially if you're a business, you know, a senseless, shameless plug here, you need to look at phishing resistant MFA solutions like ours to solve that puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll
In one
add,
sentence, if I may, Jax. Oh, sorry, Clea. Go ahead, Clea.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think MFA used to feel really clunky and antiquated, and like it was a hindrance to the user. Good MFA solutions, maybe Tradeware, I don't know, I haven't used it. They don't feel that way anymore. So the resistance that you might have gotten, you know, back in the day, a few years ago,
and Clea, we will make it possible for you to try it. And the MFA is invisible, right? You log in, you authenticate, you don't even know you used MFA because it's all done by the technology, the way it should be.
Yes, exactly. Remove the barrier of friction, the more secure you can make it.
Mm-hmm. Ramsey?
Actually, I was going to say just in one sentence, because that builds on MFA and that builds on the basics, is context-aware computing. So today is not the problem of understanding different variables, so who I am, where I am, when I am, which fingerprint device I'm using. Maybe I'm using Safari on my Mac 95% of the time, and suddenly Ramses is in India with a Chrome or Firefox, and so context-aware computing. Today we have enough computing power in our even in the phones. You know, they are so powerful that you can factor in different variables in order to trigger, if necessary, an MFA. And if I'm not even happy with that MFA, it can trigger another, you know, third factor or whatever. So the question was from Rob, if I remember correctly, game-changing, context-aware computing. I mean, combining different variables into, is it really can be trusted? That would be my answer, which is super cool. Context-aware, which is very nice. I think so.
Yeah. Super engaging. I mean, the chat is blown up, you guys. Oh, here we go. Farley, as a small business owner, how can small businesses adopt enterprise-grade security solutions without breaking the budget? This is always a good question. While recognizing that I cannot afford to have it, it also seems prohibitively expensive. And this is like a key challenge for small businesses of like, I can't afford something that's going to cost me $300,000 or even $700,000. Like, you're probably not going to be buying Splunk, for example. What's your thoughts on this, Heath?
So, I mean, my opinion is, as a business, depending on the size of your business, you're going to have to make choices, right? To run your business, you got to make money first, but start with the basics, as everyone said. What's your number one risk? Your business email, right? So use an actual business grade email solution. Can be Google, could be Microsoft, could be, you know, one of the other ones, but use a business grade solution that offers the ability to not have vendor lock for your MFA, right? And then choose ones that can implement strong MFA. Most of those that are affordable are being built on standards, right? So we built ours on standards, you know, the single sign-on standards, SAML, OpenID Connect, et cetera. Other solutions that are out there do the same thing. So, and then start with, you know, if you go Microsoft and you use Microsoft Defender and you use strong MFA, you're at least starting to address at a foundational level the basics, and then go back and read the CIS controls, as I mentioned before. The number one first thing is to take an inventory, and this was mentioned earlier. You need to know what you have, which means your people and your physical devices, etc., and then decide, and then where your data lives, and then you have to map out what or who has access to that and how. And then what can I do within my budget to secure those access controls? And you can do it affordably. Again, just like in any scenario, even in my own life, I'm either going to trade time for money, meaning I'm going to spend time to actually do the work, or I'm going to spend money to buy my time back with a more accelerated tool.
Yep. Bingo. Yeah. And I like how you prioritize. What is the most like HVA, high value assets within your environment, your crown jewels, protect those and move through that. All right, Clea, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, just to add to this, you know, our greatest asset and weakness is ourselves and our employees. So, you know, educate your team on what pig butchering is and phishing, and you know, don't shy away from using the free resources. There's tons of things on YouTube. There's tons of practitioners who have given back and kind of written the basics of training, and I don't think those should be overlooked. There's a lot of value there and awareness that can be provided freely.
Absolutely. And the
Agreed.
CIS controls are a free resource. Like go read them, use them.
They're a little dense, but do it.
But take them as a starting point. Take something as a starting point.
Yeah. All right, Dr. J, I'm going to pivot. This question's for you. This is all about NSA. So NSA often leads advancements in cybersecurity frameworks. Are there any new frameworks or standards that enterprises should be aware of to stay ahead of the curve that you're aware of that you can share with us?
I won't say any new ones right now, but I think we're all pretty familiar with these. Because I mean, of course, when it comes to cybersecurity frameworks, they do, as we know, they offer a structured way to help us identify, assess, and mitigate risks. And also with that said, it helps to standardize those processes, comply with regulations and what have you. So, but I guess to that I want to emphasize in that light are the NIST, CSF, and zero trust architecture. So with the NIST cybersecurity framework, the CSF 2.0. So with this framework, this update, I'd say it goes beyond critical infrastructure. Look at having a more a holistic approach, like for organizations of any size. I know we just talked about small businesses, so I think this would be a benefit for them as well. Focus on those 6 essential functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and govern. So ensuring that cybersecurity strategies are they stay one-on-one. They make sure that they're aligned with those business goals and objectives. And second, as I mentioned, with zero trust architecture, or ZTA, folks like to call it, zero trust, operates on the principle of never trust, always verify. Make sure we have continuous authentication and minimizing those access privileges. So with that said, a couple of those advantages that comes with that. So when you have that continuous verification, make sure that no user device is just trusted by default, just because it's named. So you want to make sure, and also just giving the minimal access, no more or anything egregious, I'd say. So with that said, you're trying to make sure you keep that that service level at a minimum, as far as keeping that minimal access. We're limiting those user privileges to the minimum. You're reducing those your potential for those insider threat risks, and maybe even lateral movement within your network.
Yeah, least privilege, definitely. Back to the basics again, things that we hear. I like this, Chris. Good question. Thanks for joining. Regarding training, are there any emerging trends we should be following for training? Thoughts on this? There's a lot. Ramses, what are you thinking?
Let me get that one, if I may. Being an ISACA Hall of Fame and being with ISACA, which is internationally recognized, around the world, of course. I would say that, of course, governance, privacy, security, resiliency, all those topics we all know, and there are fantastic trainings, from ISACA and other associations. But I especially like the guidance that ISACA has provided on digital trust. Because digital trust talks about transparency, it touches ethics, of course. It understands not customers, but it says clients and consumers of information. I love it how the digital trust framework or guidance doesn't talk about customers, but consumers, but the consumer part of consuming information, not consumer of buying things, providers and consumers of information, especially in this digital age. Again, ethics, transparency. It understands transactions in this digital age. And going back to Clea's point on supply chain, well, digital transactions, that they are an input for a process on a company process, and then it becomes an output for another process. Well, that's the idea of a chain, right? So digital trust, Chris, that would be my answer to your question. Apart from resiliency, the capacity to endure. Let's not forget privacy. I know I'm European, so probably you're thinking, of course, GDPR again. Well, it never went away. So now it's AI, but remember the privacy and it's still there. It's actually on Article 12 of the Human Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right? So But digital trust, Chris, would be my answer. No, the idea of trusting in a good way in the epoch of fakes, and misinformation and disinformation. Digital trust, I love it in terms of getting trained and getting robust and solid, apart from all of the other dimensions: privacy, governance, security, resiliency, privacy. But digital trust would be my answer to make it compelling, Chris, for your question. Back to you guys. Yeah.
Love it. All right, I think we have time for one more question, and this one is near and dear to my heart, being that I work for the largest learning company in the world. So it's all about user experience. But with that, we've got to have good security, right? So one of the big things that I've learned working at my level is CTOs don't like to work with the security, because it's like, oh God, here comes security. You're going to make our life challenging. We've got, like Leah was saying, multi-factor in this, and it gets really clunky sometimes, and it doesn't provide the best user experience. So Keith, I'd love to get your insights, and then collectively group anybody else that would like to chime in. What are your thoughts on how organizations can do a better job with balancing security, having that strong security, but also providing that best user experience?
Yeah, so I think there's two different sides to this, right? So from a business, if you're a service provider, you're trying to figure out, how do I maintain business continuity for getting my product out to people without creating interruptions or things like that. So I think there's a fine line to walk there. I do think that there's modern solutions to help. I already discussed, how do you make MFA invisible to the user is one step. That's one example. But I think more importantly is, and I think we're starting to see this either from the private sector or from the public sector, really starting to get the leadership, even at the board level, to have buy-in of why. And if you get the buy-in and then you do it correctly with that understanding, it's like, as a stupid example, why is it that my auto manufacturer still has to remind me through a ding to put my seatbelt on? Right? So, we have to have some sense of, this is important, right? I have children. I should put my seatbelt on so I stay alive to raise my children, right? Like, I need to put my seatbelt on of security to keep my business running, because whether CEOs like it or not, especially if you're anywhere below a mid-tier business, 60% of the mid-tier businesses do not survive after a single cyber incident. That's just facts that are out there. Unfortunately, going back to Ramses, and Clea touched on this earlier as well, this false sense of security, we only see in the headline news the really big players that get hit, whether that was CrowdStrike, CDK, whether it was Microsoft themselves, whether it was Target from 13 years ago. None of them went out of business, and they all think, oh, well, I'll just survive, right? And they gamble on pay now or pay later, and it needs to go into that buy-in. And I think it's just what value are you showing it through? But yeah, and Tim sure just made a thing here, says make it personal, right? And I don't know that necessarily it's all centered around technology, but it's company culture across it to get it there.
Yep. I love that. Thank you, Heath. Opening the floor to see if any of the other panelists, Clea, Ramses.
Yeah.
Clea, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Clea.
So a lot of the work we do, as an application security consultancy, we do this pen test. That's the end result, right? But there's all these broken processes that got us to this point. I shouldn't have seen any of these vulnerabilities because they should have been caught upstream. And why weren't they, right? Like, so what is the root cause of this? And often to this question, it's a miscommunication between the technology leaders and security and the business understanding the risks that they're allowing to slip through the cracks in this. And I don't think that it works with this iron fist where security comes in and says, these are all the things you have to do, and these are the products that you have to use, and this is the way you mandate. You have to form a partnership and do it with the capability and capacity of the organization and the cultural appetite, right? And security's job is not to say, hey, this is what you have to do. You have to say, here are the risks. This is the impact. This is what it might look like if something happens. It's all a maybe. It's all hypothetical. We have to be attacked, this, blah, blah, blah. But this is what I'm telling you could happen. Here's how I recommend you fix it. What does your organization have the capability and capacity to take on? And how can I be your partner to make that happen? And I think until we approach it in a partnership fashion with, passing the ownership away from just security to the entire business, we're never going to move the needle.
100%. Nailed that. Yeah, Clea, I 100% agree on partnership there. It has to be a collaboration. Ramsey, I can tell you want to add here.
No, just 1 minute. I think it's a game of risk and reward.
Yeah.
I think that we have to play the game of risk and reward, of course, protecting the business on the 3 very pillars of every company on the planet. I know it sounds generic, but let me give me 30 seconds to say that every company in the planet has identity, data, and applications. I know there are sub-disciplines to these 3 pillars classification, but basically, who has access to what? Applications are robust and solid, yes or no? I mean, how we can fortify them, and then the protection of data. So a risk and reward. Actually, your question was about balancing, and there was a question before about the small and medium businesses, having to spend. Well, risk and reward. Protect the jewels of the crown. In cybersecurity, there's not a big bang. You are not 0 today, and you will be 100 tomorrow. On the contrary, it's a journey. But in the journey, if you decide, as Heath was saying, that identity is critical, who has access to what, go for it. And then next quarter, we'll see. But encrypt today. If you have very little money, at least encrypt all the information just in case you get hacked. So it's a journey and a risk and reward, I would say, sort of game on these 3 very pillars: identity, data, and applications. Back to you.
Love this. All right. I wanted to real quick, Dr. J, any final thoughts? And then I'm going to wrap us up. 30 seconds.
Yeah. So, I just want to add one thing that I wanted to add to that just real fast is that I think also too that we don't want to forget that it's also a mindset, having that mindset, tie into that culture, company culture. If you don't have that security mindset going in and how the business is going to be run, implementing cybersecurity from the beginning at its core, at its root, business is going to fail, because a lot of times when we see these organizations, of course, we just talk about these big organizations that get hacked and exposed. We hear about very rudimentary, cybersecurity principles that they're violating, like their password is password, or just stuff like that. So to me, then they're not taking cybersecurity seriously as they need to. So again, I think also just kind of as we touched on, just going back to the basics and really make sure that we implement cybersecurity from the beginning and taking it seriously. And last thing I'll just say, thank you, Jax, for coordinating and running this today. I had a great time with you all, and I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know we're out of time. There's so much to cover. I think this absolutely is going to warrant a follow-up, maybe with you guys coming back. I do want to stop for a second and say I didn't do much at all. Liz Perry, behind the scenes, who's been pulling up your questions for us. She is rocking this. Thank you, Liz. You're fantastic. Yeah, also to Tradeware for hosting. You guys crushing it. To our audience, we wouldn't be here without you and all your questions and engagement. So everybody for coming in. And Larry, happy 40th. Welcome to the 40 Club. Quick reminder, this show is recorded and will be available on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Please feel free, share this out. I encourage you, share it out, like the video, share it out with your network. Sharing is caring. And if you have further questions or comments we haven't covered in here, message in the comments below. You can also reach out to the panelists. I don't think they're going to have any issues with that. You can reach out to them. They're also available. And reach out to us, and let's keep this conversation going even after this recording ends. And again, to the amazing panelists, thank you all for coming here, sharing your expertise with all of us. And as always, thank you to everyone for just making the time and jumping on here with us. I hope you all have an excellent morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Have an amazing time, and we'll see you next time here at Ready, Set, Cyber. See you all.
Thank you.